I'd gone to the same corner cafe almost every morning that month. Not because the coffee was particularly good, it wasn't, but because the windows faced east, and the light poured in soft and yellow at that hour. It made the chipped tables look less tired, and maybe it made me feel a little less tired too. That morning, I was halfway through a stale blueberry muffin when the bell above the door rang. I didn't look up at first. People came and went. But then I caught a familiar laugh, low and restrained, like she was trying not to take up too much space. It took me longer than it should have to place her. My brother's ex-Maya. She hadn't changed much in the obvious ways, still carried herself like she was balancing something fragile inside her, but the years had added something I couldn't name. She looked older, yes, but also sharper, like time had refined her instead of dulling her edges. I froze halfway through a sip of coffee. She ordered at the counter, her voice steady, almost clipped, but the way she fiddled with the strap of her bag said otherwise. She remembered her order, the same way she always had, black coffee, splash of cream, nothing sweet. When she turned, her eyes flicked over the tables, scanning, and then landed on me. Just for a second. I gave a small nod, the kind you give when you're not sure if a bigger gesture would be welcome. She came over anyway. "Daniel," she said, setting her cup down before sliding into the seat across from me. No hesitation, no asking if she could join. Like she had decided already. I tried not to stare, but my eyes kept drifting to the way her hands curved around the paper cup, holding it like it was the only warm thing in the room. "It's been a while," I managed. My voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. 7 years, she said, as if she'd counted. The silence stretched. Not heavy, not awkward, just something we both leaned into. I folded my napkin into sharp corners, then unfolded it again. She noticed, I think, but didn't comment. Instead, she asked, "Do you still write?" That caught me off guard. Of all the things she could have remembered, she picked that. I hadn't told anyone in years, not even my brother, that I still scribbled half-finished stories in my phone's notes app, sometimes, I admitted. Not much worth reading. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "That's what you always said." We didn't talk about my brother. Not directly. But he was in the air between us, like smoke that lingers even after the fire's gone. I wanted to ask why she was here, why now, why she thought sitting across from me made sense after all this time. Instead, I asked, "How long are you in town?" She tilted her head, considering. "Depends," she said. And she left it there, unfinished. The coffee shop hummed around us, machines hissing, conversations half heard. But in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to the way her eyes held mine just a little longer than was comfortable. When she finally stood, she didn't give me the chance to say anything else. She just rested her hand lightly on the table, close enough that I noticed the faint tremor in her fingers, and said, "I'll call you." Except I knew she didn't have my number anymore. Which is why, 10 minutes after she left, when my phone buzzed with an unknown text, "We need to talk." Tonight, I stared at it for a long time, unsure if I wanted to answer or not. And yet, I couldn't put the phone down. I almost didn't go that night. Her text sat on my phone like a dare, and I kept checking it, half hoping it would vanish on its own. But by the time the streetlights buzzed on outside my apartment, I found myself walking toward the small tea shop 2 blocks from the cafe. She was already there. Seated in the corner, back straight, hands folded neatly around a steaming cup. Not coffee this time, jasmine tea. I noticed the detail, filed it away. "Daniel," she said, as if she'd been waiting all along. I slid into the seat across from her. The table between us felt too small, like it couldn't hold the distance we were supposed to keep. We started with the safe stuff, how the neighborhood had changed, where she'd been living, her work. She didn't ask about my brother, and I didn't bring him up. The silence of his absence said enough. At one point, she laughed quietly at something I said about the city's awful traffic, and then her face softened, the way someone looks when a memory ambushes them. "Do you remember," she asked, "the summer you broke your wrist? You were stuck in that cast, miserable, and I came by the house with takeout because your brother had forgotten." I blinked. I hadn't thought about that in years. "You brought soup," I said slowly. "From that place with the cracked red bowls." She nodded, smiling faintly. "You looked so annoyed that I'd shown up. But you ate every bite." Her gaze lingered on me in a way that made the air shift. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, not from the tea. The thing about Maya wasn't just her age, though that was part of it. She was my brother's ex. That fact alone should have been enough to draw a clear line. But instead, the memory she offered, the soup, the way she'd seen me even back then, blurred it. I found myself imagining her life in pieces. Who she went home to. If anyone held her hand when the night stretched too long. I hated myself for wanting to know. She must have sensed the weight of my thoughts, because she said quietly, "This isn't simple, is it?" "No," I admitted. "It's not." We let the silence stand. Not heavy, not awkward, just the kind that pressed close, daring either of us to break it. I traced the rim of my cup with one finger, while she shifted her hand on the table, almost like she was going to reach across but thought better of it. Eventually, when we both stood to leave, she brushed past me in the narrow space between the table and the wall. Her shoulder grazed my arm, light, accidental, but deliberate in how it lingered just a moment too long. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. I'd stopped by the cafe on a Thursday afternoon, too late for the morning crowd, too early for the evening rush. I thought I'd have the place to myself. But there she was. Sitting near the back, half turned toward the window. A book open in front of her, unread. She noticed me before I had a chance to decide if I'd pretend not to see her. Her hand lifted, a small wave, like she wasn't sure she should. I sat down. Not across from her this time, next to her, the only seat free. The closeness felt different, too deliberate. "You always come here," she said. I shrugged. "Guess I like the light." Her smile flickered, gone before I could hold on to it. She looked back at her untouched tea. Fingers tapping lightly against the cup, like she was trying to release something without saying it. We talked about nothing. Weather. Work. The kind of things people say when they're avoiding the real part. And then, in the middle of it, she went quiet. Her voice, when it came, was softer. "You know this, us, sitting here, it doesn't look right." I felt my chest tighten. "Because of him?" "Because of everything," she said. No explanation, but I understood. Before I could answer, the bell above the cafe door rang. A friend of mine walked in, Jared, someone I'd known since college. He spotted me instantly. "Daniel. Hey, didn't know you'd be here." His eyes flicked to Maya. "A beat. Oh. Hi." She nodded politely, lips pressed into a small line. Jared hesitated, like he wanted to ask, but thought better of it. He just grabbed his coffee and left, though not without a look back that said more than words. After he was gone, Maya's shoulders stiffened. She shifted in her seat, like suddenly the air had gone wrong. "See," she whispered. "Already complicated." I wanted to say it didn't matter. That people misread things all the time. But the word stuck. Instead, I folded and unfolded the cardboard sleeve on my cup until it tore. She reached out, almost without thinking, and touched the torn edge still in my hand. Just a brush of her fingers. My breath caught, ridiculous, really, how something so small could feel so much. Her hand lingered, then pulled back quick, as if she realized she'd crossed some invisible line. I thought she might stand, leave. She didn't. Instead, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Daniel, she began, and stopped. The sound of my name in her mouth, hesitant, unfinished, felt like a secret. Her eyes lifted to mine. Close. Too close. The kind of distance where a single breath could tip one world into another. And then she looked away. Just like that. The moment slipped, like water between my fingers. It was late when we walked together. Not planned, again, she'd been leaving the cafe just as I was locking up my laptop, and the streets felt safer in pairs. At least, that's what I told myself. The city had gone quiet in that particular way, street lamps buzzing, the occasional car cutting through the night. Our footsteps filled the space between. She carried her coat draped over one arm instead of wearing it, even though the air was cool. A stubborn gesture, or maybe she liked the chill. "You're quiet tonight," she said after a block. "I'm always quiet," I answered, but it sounded more like a defense than a fact. We stopped at a bench under a weak streetlight. She set her coat down, smoothed it flat, then sat. I stayed standing for a moment before joining her. For a while, we just listened, to the crickets, the far-off hum of traffic. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers interlaced, knuckles pale with the pressure. Finally, she spoke. "I shouldn't be here with you." Something in the way she said it, tired, resigned, burned more than if she'd yelled. "You say that," I murmured, "but you don't leave." She turned to me, sharp, then softer. "Do you know what it would mean if I stayed?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. My chest felt too full of things I wasn't supposed to admit. She laughed quietly then, but it wasn't humor, it was the kind of laugh people make when the truth presses too close. "You're young, Daniel. You think this is, what? Something romantic? A secret worth keeping?" Her words stung, but not because they were cruel. Because they weren't. I stared down at my hands, flexing them against my knees. "I don't think it's simple. But I don't think it's nothing, either." That silence again. Only this time it was heavier, the kind that dared one of us to step off the edge. She shifted, resting her elbow on the back of the bench, body angled toward me. "You don't know what you'd be giving up." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But maybe I know what I'd regret more." Her breath caught, barely audible, but I felt it. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was measuring the risk in my face. I thought she'd stand, walk away, end it right there. Instead, she leaned in, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corner of her eyes, the curve of her lips caught between resolve and surrender. My hand shifted, almost of its own will, brushing against hers where they rested on the bench. She didn't move away. It was the smallest contact, but it felt like the world tilted. Her voice came low, nearly a whisper. "Do you know what you're doing?" And I had no answer. Not one I trusted. After that night on the bench, I didn't see her for a week. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Wrong timing, different routines. But by the fourth day, when even the cafe seemed emptied of her presence, I knew better. She was pulling back. I kept checking my phone anyway. Nothing. Not even the courtesy of silence wrapped in words. Just absence. On the fifth day, I almost convinced myself to let it go. Maybe that was her way of drawing the line she'd been circling since the beginning. And then, as if on cue, I saw her outside the grocery store, balancing a paper bag against her hip. And a child holding her hand. A girl, maybe 10. Dark hair pulled into a ponytail, the same tilt of chin I'd seen in Maya. She noticed me before Maya did. Gave me a curious stare, unblinking. Maya followed her gaze, and when her eyes landed on me, something shuddered. Quick. Controlled. "Daniel," she said, voice flat, polite. Not the voice she'd used on the bench. I nodded. Couldn't manage more. The girl tugged at her sleeve. "Mom. Mom." The word rang in my chest like a dull bell. Maya's grip tightened on the girl's hand. She gave me the smallest shake of her head, the kind meant to end a conversation before it began. And then she was gone, turning, walking quickly, paper bag pressed to her side, her daughter at her arm. I didn't follow. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the blank text box on my phone. Fingers hovering, typing, deleting. Words that felt right in the moment suddenly wrong when I reread them. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? Does this change everything? All unsent. All erased. The silence stretched through the days that followed. Each empty chair in the cafe reminded me of her. The spaces where her presence had once felt certain now felt like gaps in a sentence left unfinished. I told myself not to care. That she had her life, her reasons, her responsibilities. But the truth was, it wasn't heartbreak I felt. It was something slower. Like being paused mid-breath. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. One evening, I walked by her building. I knew it was wrong, but my feet carried me there anyway. I stood across the street, watching the faint glow of a lamp in her window. For a long while, I thought about knocking, about pressing that fragile line of possibility. But in the end, I turned away. The night air felt heavier than usual. My hands stayed in my pockets, my phone a weight I didn't touch. And her window stayed lit, with no shadow moving toward the door. It was raining the night I finally saw her again. Not a storm, just steady drops tapping against the pavement, filling the gutters. She was standing outside her building, groceries tucked under one arm, umbrella half collapsed in the other. Struggling with her keys. I almost kept walking. But some part of me, stubborn, tired of waiting, slowed. "Maya," I said. She turned, startled. For a moment, I thought she might pretend not to recognize me. But then her shoulders dropped, like she'd been carrying weight too long. "Daniel," she said softly. I stepped closer, water dripping off my hood. "You could have told me." Her eyes flicked away. "About her." "About everything," I said. "About why you pulled back." She sighed, shaking rain from her umbrella before leaning it against the wall. "Because it's not simple. Because you think this is just about us, but it's not. I have a daughter. A past. A life that doesn't fit into this." She gestured between us. I didn't answer right away. Just watched her shift the grocery bag higher, like she needed something to hold on to. "I'm not asking you to make it simple," I said finally. "I'm just asking you not to disappear." Her face softened, then hardened again. "Do you even know what you'd be stepping into?" "No," I admitted. My voice cracked a little. "But I know what it feels like when you're gone. And I can't." I stopped. The words caught. Too much, too fast. She looked at me then, really looked. Like she was peeling back every layer, testing if what she saw would hold. The rain filled the silence between us. "Daniel," she whispered, and for the first time, there wasn't resistance in it. Just fear. Just truth. I reached out, not bold, just tentative, and touched the strap of the grocery bag, steadying it. My hand brushed hers. Small. Ordinary. But it felt like the only honest thing I'd done in weeks. Her fingers didn't move away. We stood there, soaked, rain dripping from the eaves, two people who shouldn't have been standing so close. And yet we were. "I can't promise anything," she said at last. "I'm not asking for everything," I answered. Her mouth twitched, something between a laugh and a sob. And then she nodded, the smallest surrender. "Okay," she whispered. It wasn't dramatic. No declarations. No kiss. Just that one word, shared in the quiet rain. And somehow, it was enough. Time didn't change everything overnight. Some days, it still felt fragile, like one wrong word might undo it all. But little by little, the edges softened. She let me in, not with speeches, but with routines. A text in the morning, 8:47 a.m. coffee. A shared walk to the park after her daughter was asleep. Evenings where I'd help carry groceries upstairs, careful not to drop the tea she always bought. It wasn't simple, but it was steady. And steady, I learned, could feel like a kind of miracle. We found our way back to that same bench under the weak streetlight. This time, she sat closer. Her coat folded neatly beside her, her hands resting loosely on her lap. I remembered how tense those hands had been the first night we'd sat there, knuckles pale, fingers laced too tight. Now, when my hand brushed hers, she didn't flinch. She just let it stay. Her daughter grew used to seeing me around. At first cautious, then curious, then slowly, comfortable. I never rushed it. Some things you don't earn quickly. Maya noticed, of course. She always noticed. "You're patient," she said one evening, pouring hot water over tea leaves. "More patient than I expected." I smiled at that. "You never asked me if I was in a hurry." She looked up, her lips curving into something small, private. "I guess I didn't have to." The cafe stayed part of our lives, too. Same corner table. Same window catching the morning light. Her black coffee with a splash of cream, my bad habit of folding napkins until they tore. We didn't need to say much anymore. Sometimes the silence was enough. And yet, there were still moments that caught me off guard. Like the way she'd glance at me across the table, eyes soft but steady. Or the way her hand would find mine on the walk home, no hesitation now. It never felt dramatic. It just felt right. Looking back, I don't think it was the rain, or the tea, or even the bench that changed everything. It was the quiet moments stacked together, the pauses, the unsent texts, the spaces we finally filled. One evening, as we left the cafe, she stopped at the door. The air smelled faintly of coffee grounds and rain. She tilted her head toward me, the smallest smile tugging at her mouth. "Do you remember?" she asked. I knew exactly what she meant. The first morning. Her hand on the table, mine folding a napkin to pieces, both of us pretending not to notice the way the air felt heavier than it should. "Yeah," I said. "I remember." She reached for my hand, fingers warm around mine. And this time, I didn't need to wonder if she'd pull away. "Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?"